It is not by moral outrage alone that people have lent their lives to the struggle for better worlds. Neither is it by the purity of instruction from theory. There is certainly no royal road, only the one made by walking. Many have walked, many have been forced to move, many have found roads while walking with others.
Can you please introduce yourself and your work?
Yes, I normally introduce myself as a militant. Well, my name is Sónia Vas Borges, and I normally introduce myself as a militant interdisciplinary historian. I use the term militant due to the research and the work that I do on militant education with the PAIGC, the African Party for Independence of Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde, that was based in three main pillars: the technical training, the political education, and the transformation of individual and collective behaviors. And I adopt this principle for my life, but also as part of my professional life. Then I use the term interdisciplinary because history for the sake of history can be very problematic. And the interdisciplinarity that concerns with the study of a research of a topic within multiple disciplines, and also how to see the transfer of methods and approaches from these disciplines to another. So I use that practice together with history. And some of these practices can be seen on the work that I have been developing in terms of in the academy. For example, with the book Militant Education, published in 2019, but also with the films or in the field of visual arts and the production of the co-production of the film Navigating the Pilot School from 2016, the Mangrove School from 2022, and now the Weaving Stories While Walking that is present at the Biennale. But also I developed some what is considered non-academic writings, as for example, the book Na Pode Espera that I wrote in 2014, and more recently this year, the publication of the book Ragaz, Because the Sea Has No Place to Grab, published with Common Notions in Philadelphia. So it's this combination between passion for stories and history and the academic and the social political activism that I think I can define my work as.
Thank you. And before we get into the second question that we sent to you, would you be able to tell us a little bit about how that work bridges and connects to the Portuguese Pavilion and Greenhouse?
I've been researching on liberation movements, especially the liberation struggle of in Guinea-Bissau by the African Party for Independence of Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde. And this year we are celebrating the 100th anniversary of Amilcar Cabral birth, but also the end of the authoritarian regime in Portugal. So talking about liberation struggles, we are talking about a movement that emerged, that has a long tradition against the fight of a colonial regime. So thinking about the year that we are now and what we are celebrating, my work connects with that, especially when you talk about education and how crucial education, and I see education on a broader aspect, not just in terms of schooling, how important education was for achieving independence and to put the end of authoritarian regime in Portugal. So I think that's how my work connects with the Portuguese Pavilion this year.
Would you be able to tell us about the 4 components of Greenhouse?
So Greenhouse intends to be or challenges a curatorial hegemonies and encourage fluid modes of artistic production in a collaborative, decolonial and discursive space. And to achieve this, we designed 4 components: the garden that compose installation, space and time, living archive that compose movement, sound, and performance, the school that compose education, history, and revolution, and the assemblies, public that compose public and the communities. The garden is the exhibition space under the responsibility of Mónica de Miranda. And the garden proposes soil and the body as a vector of the colonial and ecological expression, and as an active agent of the earth, carrying memories and stories. It is inspired by the thought of, as I said, Amilcar Cabral, who was an agronomist, a poet, and a leader of the liberation struggle of Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde. And he proposed the soil as an active agent of historical processes. So soil moves in a constantly and is transformed and is a permanent source of life, and illustrates the interdependence between human actions, social and material conditions, and the conditions of the land. So this garden you'll find on the 3rd floor of the Palacio Franchetti, and is combined with several islands, but also with sculptures. And sculptures, there are stages from seeing it as vertical gardens that change configuration, and also various discursive actions of the program. So you have sculptures together with the plants. At the moment that the plants grows, the sculpture will also change because they will be covered. Plants will start to take space of it. So the sculpture is not a static object, but is in constant change through the work of the plants. For example, there is 6 sculptures in the space designed by Mónica de Miranda, Mirror on the Wall, the Crosstalk, and the Schools of the Revolution. And we combine this exhibition space with 2 films, The Transplanting, a film made by Mónica de Miranda, and a film, Weaving Stories While Walking, that was produced by me and Mónica de Miranda. And we also have a space that is called sculpture that is called Crosstalk, where we broadcast episodes of the Funambulist podcast as an extension of a school that is one of the other activities of the project. Then the second aspect of the project is the living archive that composed with sound, movement, and performance. So the sound installation transmissions that was produced by me and Monica and Felipe, the producer, is the guide throughout the garden. So it's produced with historical radio broadcasts, children's songs, but also voices, sounds from borders or from kitchen gardens or in the peripheries of Lisbon. So it's a wide array of sounds there. And this is part of the living archive. And together with the living archive, you have the choreography made by Vânia Gala with the title Passa Folhas. Then the third activity is the schools, that I am the curator of it. And the goal is to transform the school in a garden, or the school in the garden, and to create a creative program of workshops and research. And the schools, of course, encompasses these 3 elements that I mentioned to you at the beginning of militant education, that I'll repeat again, that is the technical training, political education, and the individual and collective transformation of behaviors. Last week we had a week of workshops with silent speaking, focusing on sign language. We had a workshop on dragon dreaming, and we produce some elements or 3 texts, produce a zine that is composed by 3 texts of the Funambulist, issue number 49 of Schools of the Revolution, that is in three writings, English, Italian, and English Braille. So with that, we are talking about the schools aspect that extends to the crosstalk on the funambulist and the film weaving histories. And the last aspect is the assemblies that is created by me, Monica, and other artists from where curators and artists and associations, they have the space of extending the school. So several conversations happen there with people from Portugal, Angola, Cape Verde, Brazil, Benin, Nigeria, guests such as Denise Ferreira da Silva, Kitty Furtado, Vandana Shiva. Last week we had Bonaventure So, and we'll continue to have other artists and participants coming and talking.
Could you please tell us about how you came up with the idea for the pavilion?
The idea of the pavilion, it came from Monica de Miranda. I was invited by Monica with the idea of creating a Creole garden in the space and to think about the greenhouse as a space that represents represents a home of multiple possibilities, but also of this look at home as an imagined return, where the question of diaspora, migration, and home belonging are, and also the issue of exile is also part of the general idea. So we combine the Creole garden from Edouard Glissant as this space of biodiverse garden created by enslaved people, contraposing the monoculture that Sylvia Wynter would call plots. And we combine this with the question of the soil of Amilcar Cabral and decide to add another layer that is the plots of land that migrants in the periphery of Lisbon use to create another way of subsistence, but also as a place of gathering. So the idea is a combination of all these aspects to create and envision the Creole garden on a broader sense, but also to combine it with the process of liberation struggle, where there was the liberated areas, where several actions was also happening. So it's not just the tending or the taking care of the land, but to think about all the process that happened inside the space called liberated areas during the 1960s and the 1970s.
Next question is, how should we read a Creole garden in a place like Venice? You could either in the context of the biennial, but also the city of Venice, either or both.
Well, I was reading the book African Venice that was published this year. That is a guide of art, culture, and people. And in this book, I learned about the existence of a banana or a plantain tree in San Marco, or about the existence of a garden of palm trees in Giudecca. I think is in a hotel. But I also learned through this book about the Venetian beads used in African commerce. And later on the book, it talks about the African presence at the Biennale that goes from race exclusion to the curatorial interventions and all the contradictions or controversies that surrounds the participation. But I was also reading about the history of palaces and their problematic and imperial story. So I think the Creole garden inside this palace, especially because it's using the third floor that used to be a library and an archive, probably made it of exotic wood. The Creole garden comes to question the garden by bringing all these active agents, like the plants and the soil, the people, the multiplicity of possibilities, these reflections and these encounters. So by questioning this space and the hierarchies that I mentioned at the beginning, I think the Creole garden inside Venice should read an extension of the African presence in Venice, but also in the Biennale, and the way that encourages for us to deconstruct the colonial discourse and to rethink about the colonial ways of projecting the possibilities of dialogue or not. So in this way, I would see the Creole Garden as this extension of multiple possibilities in the space of Venice. And also to think that inside the Creole Garden, we have several islands. So taking into account the geography of Venice, I think is a good way of thinking the connection between the islands and this archipelago, and how one can think about geographies, one can think about communication, and how one can think about imagining other possibilities.
How does the pavilion balance the impetus for collective action and gardens as a place to reflect and rest?
I would like to question a little bit the garden as a place to reflect and rest, because inside the garden there is so many things happening. If you think about the gardens of Venice, for example, the ones from the 1800s, 1900s, where gardens, yes, they have all this imperial background by the plants, the trees that live there or were transplanted there. But to think about the garden as just a place of reflection and rest, we erase all the work, or we might fall in the mistake of erasing the work of the gardeners that do their work there every day. So there is a separation between those who work to maintain the garden and those who enjoy the garden. And in this process of thinking, the work of the gardeners is not really a place to rest, but we can think it as a collective work, and also forces us to question who has access to it, because gardens will go at a certain time and people who come to reflect and rest will come at another time. So I think with the Creole Garden, all these aspects are working at the same time. We can see the vigilators there who help us to keep the garden alive. So they are there every day. And again, we bring the question of the workers inside this space. And also when we think about the sculptures that inhabit the garden or the Creole Garden, you see that the sculptures are not static, and therefore they are in constant movement, and they can actually be used as spaces of performance. Yes, I think that will be one of the parts that I will question as the garden as a space of rest and reflection, because by doing that, we erase all the rhizomatic or the collaborative work that happens, let's say, in the background, that needs to be put it forward, that the Creole Garden actually brings the garden as a space of learning, of thinking about the biodiversity, also, of course, a place of to rest and reflect, but also as a space of transmissions, intergenerational transmission.
And this question's a little bit, also a little bit challenging. How do you reconcile this pavilion with the climate impact of the biennial itself?
Well, I think it's clearly known that the impact or the carbon footprint of the Biennale is big. But I do think that there is no cultural project that can have a zero impact. What I think it's necessary to have in mind is the combination between this impact, but also the social and educative impact of the exhibition or of the Biennale. In the particular case of the Portuguese pavilion, we try to generate as less garbage as possible. The plants that we have in the pavilion, they are all from Italy, from different parts of Italy. And the soil of this garden, our aim, and we are working with an institution called the Venice Biennale to think about how can we donate the plants and the soil to the community around so they will gain another life instead of just dispose them. So to extend this garden and the life of this garden to other places. Another aspect of seeing, or that we thought about to reduce this imprint in the environment, is to combine the workshops in specific moments, so to reduce the amount of traveling of guests to the pavilion. For example, we combine many activities during the opening. This past week, we combined most of the activities of the school in 1 week. And for November, we also have the closing of the Biennale. We also have another moment of activities. So we try to combine them in order to reduce the level of travel and the level of the number of costs that would entail.
And our last question that we ask all of our interviewees is, what's next for you?
I think my next is rest. I think there is a hidden or maybe a not so much spoken aspect of participating and doing a biennale and representing a country, and that is the impact that it has on a person, on physically, emotionally, but also intellectually. So my next is to rest and to ground myself on this ground that this year shifted very much. But also this rest means to take in consideration all the learning and the experiences that one takes of participating in such a big project. But this rest is also a nest of ideas, dreams, and projects. So how can I continue? So in terms of the Biennale, I will continue to work with Monica and Miranda and see what is the next step for the greenhouse, especially with the sculptures, that they are active and they are easy to transport and continue another life. But I'll also continue to work on my last book presentation, or the presentation of my last book, and focus more on the Walking Archives project that I've been working in a couple of years. So I hope within the rest, I'll find and continue to have the joy that I always find in doing my work, or the work that I do.